Let's give a rowdy welcome and applause to Dr. Shayne Morris. Right on, buddy.
All right, can you hear me? Okay. How many of you took Neurosin this morning? All right. So we have a saying at Systemic. Whenever we have meetings, whenever we're going to do some problem solving, group trainings, we always ask each other, and it's not just me, it's the entire company, as you're sitting in the meeting, as the meeting's starting to adjourn, to come together, we look around the room and say, did you take your Neurosin? If you didn't take your Neurosin, go take your Neurosin before you come back to the meeting. If you ask a silly question during the meeting, you ask them immediately, did you take your Neurosin? If you didn't take your Neurosin, don't ask questions. I'm kidding. But we do that a lot around Systemic because it really has, it's a running joke, but it's real. A lot of us take our products, everybody does, and we do feel the benefits. The reason I ask you is this is going to be, for me, an amazing introduction to our research, our literal, invested, enormous amounts of research at Systemic Formulas. Right? We focus on a few things at Systemic. Most of our research is on microbiome. You don't get to see it because it's not ready yet. But we have some other areas of research. This happens to be one of them because of its relationship to the immune system, which of course is related to the microbiome to some degree. Now, when I get to that point, perhaps many of you are going to find some of this stuff really, really heady, really challenging. You have the slides. This is Resolution 101. I guarantee you there's going to be a 102 and a 103 and a 104. We're going to keep having webinars and other meetings that cover this material. So don't think that just because I've given you way more than you can digest in 2 hours, and it is 2 hours, by the way, that it's too much. You'll get it again and again and again. I want to give you as much as I can today because it allows it to marinate, and you can review it, and it prepares you. There's a lot of fundamentals today we're going to go over that allow you to take what you all want to do is take this knowledge back to your clinic. You want to take it back to your clinic for educating your patient. You want to take it back to your clinic for understanding what's going on in someone's body, whether you use kinesiology, blood tests, whether you use equipment in your facility to measure the health of your patients. Regardless, this is fundamental information today. But it is heavy, and if you didn't take your Neurosin, shame on you. But we will review this again and again. Take good notes. We won't have as much time for questions, but I'll do my best. And again, I'm really excited to give this to you guys because we have spent months and months and months looking deeply into krill. And there's a number of reasons we'll talk about why krill. But what we're finding at this moment, nobody else on the planet knows about krill. So it's pretty amazing. Getting into that then. So that's the talk she mentioned, the title. These are my objectives. I've given you some of my objectives regarding you all, but here's the objectives for the talk. Acute inflammation, we want to review the traditional mechanism. We've all been indoctrinated by a certain amount of inflammatory mechanisms in our lives, whether it's in college or in your training and what have you. The other thing we're going to do is go over a brief review of acute versus chronic. We're going to go over through the resolution of inflammation and what that means. How RPMs, which is the acronym for Resolvins, Protectins, Maresins, okay? We're going to identify some of the work we've done specifically on krill. We're going to look at the evidence now that we can take this forward. As I mentioned, this is the beginning, you guys. This is going to be heavy biochemistry, but this sets the plate, this sets the stage for us to start going into people and watching how it benefits people now from our new research. We had to do this in order to get to the human piece. And a lot of human pieces have been done on fish oil, which is probably where your exposure has been for most of you. And I did see the hands of some of you that have been exposed to these words, which that's exciting because that at least means 5 or 6 people in the audience probably won't nod off during this thing, maybe. And I'll just look at you guys that are still awake, and I will talk to you specifically. So what is inflammation? Nicole did a great job of reminding us that inflammation it's an age-old process. Is it a natural process? Absolutely. It is a healthy process, is it? Can it be? Absolutely. It has been defined as far back as humans have been keeping records of infection or injury, especially during wartime. You take the oldest wars, Romanic wars, Alexander's wars. Those physicians, or whatever you want to call them at the time, recorded these findings. It is as far back as you can go in the written word, you can find evidence of them writing down what is inflammation. It's a description. It's a description of many things, right? And it's described by words like calor, dolor, rubor, and tumor, meaning heat, pain, redness, and swelling. So that's really inflammation. Inflammation is a very esoteric thought. It's an idea. It's something the body's doing, and there can be 1,000 reasons why the body's doing it. Center to the inflammatory process, though, is the immune system, right? And then you can, as time went on, they looked and looked, and we're still looking, of course. But why do you have these symptoms? Well, of course, you get dilation. You get increased permeability. We talk about permeability. You guys have heard of leaky gut. Has anybody not heard of leaky gut? That would be, again, you didn't take your Neurosin. But this is a phenomenon that we want the body to do, but we only don't want to do it when it needs to be done. You need to open up junctions to allow for white blood cells, neutrophils, leukocytes, macrophages to get into tissues to fight whatever they're fighting. You also need to pass bigger nutrients back and forth. What you don't want is chronic open permeability, because now you have leaky gut, leaky brain, and leaky blood vessels, right? So but that's something they noticed, and it's an absolute phenomenon, not a theoretical. And then, of course, you've got a lot of other things going on that we all know about related to inflammation and the type of inflammation. So in your clinic, some of you can participate with me. What types of inflammatory conditions do you see in your clinic? Come on, let's get a bold person. Rheumatoid arthritis, perfect. What else? Thyroid, absolutely. Hypothyroidism. Pardon? Diabetes, thank you. I think someone said joints or something and something else. I didn't hear that. You guys are right on the money. This is not an issue that can be ignored. We've talked about it in many other cases. This particular issue is plaguing us, is it not? It is plaguing us. We've tried to address it through antibiotics. We've tried to address it through anti-inflammatories. We've tried to address it through so many mechanisms. Are we winning the battle? Are inflammatory issues rising or declining? They're rising at phenomenal rates that are unprecedented. And do we not spend a lot of money on healthcare, right? It's incredible. I don't want to soapbox too long there, but so have you treated it? How do most of you approach inflammation? We try to approach it naturally, do we not? We approach it holistically. There's the emotional component. There's the physical component. There's the mental component, right? There's the microbiome, which is one of my favorite components. We have a lot of tools, and yet we still haven't quite reached the potential we need to reach, given the insults. Do the insults surpass the tools we have to combat inflammation? Well, at the moment they do. Do you guys know how many xenobiotics, xenoestrogens, biotoxins that we've cataloged so far in modern industrial age? You guys we've taught it before, but it's in something like 800,000 compounds, man-made compounds. That doesn't include aflatoxin, things produced by mold. It's really hard for your body to keep up with that, right? When someone can create 20 different toxins to make plastics, your body can't outpace those kinds of things. When they're found in the water and they're found in the animals, and just recently we now know that BPA, they're finally accepting the BPA. Have you guys heard this? BPA is turning all of the turtles in Florida, I shouldn't say all, it's a little exaggeration, but turning all of the turtles in Florida into females. They're finding populations with no males because of BPA, right? So now people are saying, oh, that is a real thing. Okay, how long have we been talking about BPA? 2006, I think? We were saying avoid BPA in these rooms, in these meetings. All right, so then we've differentiated between chronic and acute. Clearly, chronic inflammation is way more dangerous than acute inflammation. Acute inflammation is absolutely natural, essential, healthy, and if you didn't have inflammation, you would likely die, right? It is a key component of your immune system and the immune response. Okay, some of these slides I'm going to go through faster because they're not as critical, but they're easily for your review. I threw this up there just to be somewhat antagonistic to the people at large, to groups at large. I just got an invitation to the 8th annual anti-inflammation or inflammation inhibitors. I feel about this about the same now as I feel about getting an invitation to an antibiotic meeting, right? Really. And it's still going on. They're spending billions to make anti-inflammatories. As we'll find out today, that is the exact opposite of what you want to do to your body. You do not want to stop it. You want to resolve it. So I find that this is still, and there's 200 people signed up for this. I'm not going to go protest in case you guys are wondering. But what is the inflammatory response? Just in a brief graphic so you guys can look at this over. So we get the damage. We most likely with damage comes a bacterial infection. There are so many out there. They can be, they're not necessarily commensals, but there certainly can be normal inhabitants, what we call pathobionts and others. Well, they start this process of your immune system kicks into play, right? So the wound cells, they release chemicals. We know those as cytokines. We'll talk a little more about them. And then furthermore, now we've got this invasion of bacteria. We got the immune system kicking in with cytokines. But we got to get some cells in there. So here's where your permeability happens. You have to start opening up blood vessels in order to get the arsenal, the tools, the army, the military in to fight these infections, right? So now we have a situation during inflammation that your tight junctions are open, right? So you're already kind of putting yourself a little bit at risk, depending on what you're doing. And then, of course, there's a lot of chemicals released. Histamine's one of many. We'll just cover a few today. These chemicals are critical, too, because they can drive the inflammation process, but if they stay on, it's like you sitting in the sun, nonstop, going with the planet on the sun, right? 24 hours a day, you're in the sunlight. Sooner or later, your skin's going to get burned, and that's what happens when these chemicals stay on. I could use a different example if you want, but. Well, again, this is a good referral paper for you. I wanted to point out that here's all the chemicals that are released, okay? Again, this is a nice reference point for you. This is, Shayne University stuff. You can keep this. Look at these. We got histamine and serotonin. We got bradykinin. We got C3A. This will become important later, by the way. Prostaglandins, leukotrienes, platelet activating factors, IL-1, tumor necrosis factor, and so on. These tell you what they do, right? These are the sources. What is one of the overall incredible phenomenon with where these come from? Where are all these guys being made? What kinds of cells are making them in your body? Are making all these communication chemicals. These are all immune cells, every one of them, right? With the exception of a little bit of the plasma protein by the liver. Immune cells are kicked into high gear to do this. They are amped up. They are the soccer team going into the World Cup final. They are ready for this. But look, they cause vascular leakage, and they have a lot of other things going on, and they interact with each other. These things are not lone wolves. Some of them don't even work unless their partner's around. And that's another critical point to this, is that these communications, again, we're talking about how your immune system communicates with the outside world, but it has to communicate with itself. Right? This is the path. What happens when the immune system doesn't communicate with itself? What do we start calling that? That starts with auto. Yeah, it's very dangerous. So you guys can refer back to this. Here's a fun little graphic. One of the pioneers in this that deserves some credit from the fish standpoint and some of the great research that we've been able to parlay into our world, his name's Dr. Sirhan. And I think this is originally his graphic, but here's an old, heat, redness, swelling, pain, loss of function. Once you reach this loss of function of that tissue, and that can be severe loss of function, can be just localized loss of function, you're now moving into chronic inflammation. And we'll see some other references from Roman medical writers that recorded some of these phenomenon. Okay, another chart for you to kind of help sort some of these out. It's not going to be everything, but we got cardinal signs of acute versus chronic inflammation, right? Just a quick reference point for you. The cardinal signs are the symptoms that we talk about for acute, normal things. They're absent in chronic. Chronic is starting to move throughout the tissue. It is no longer identifiable. That's why we now label them pre-autoimmune or autoimmune. They've dispersed systemically. We have causative agents. These are obvious. These are persistent. One of the more common and at least talked about, discussed chronic inflammatory organisms is Lyme, right? That's at least an acceptable model for chronic for most people. There's no arguing that out now. It meets these criteria. Persistent. And then you start to induce incorrectly what we call the adaptive immune system. So we have the innate and adaptive, and we'll talk more about that. All right, innate versus adaptive. Oh, look, right on time. This is really where it starts, okay? So you can see all the cells that are involved in this initial response, this emergency. These are your emergency reactors. These are the firefighters and the police and the EMTs that are coming to your aid immediately, right? The cellular response. So it's the innate immunity. It has crossover, by the way, with adaptive. The adaptive immunity is when, once the innate has been brought into play, it quickly recruits the adaptive, where you want to start creating your antibodies and these C proteins. These are proteins that act like antibodies, but they're different. But they go out and they try to take care of the danger for you. But they're not cells now, they're proteins and other things, like your antibodies. You're introducing this now, and this is also where you get your long-term immunity, so that if you get in contact with that same insult later, you kill it quickly, right? We've all seen that. And having your body go through this process gives you that immunity. Sometimes it's a lifetime. So this is important. We want to make this transition, and we want to do it correctly, and it's not happening right now in a really large part of our population. I wanted to just point out neurological inflammation. One of the key areas that I want to focus on today, there's some interesting work going on with Resolvin science, including in our lab, and we want to focus more on neurological because the cardiovascular component isn't as easy. The cardiovascular component, there's a lot of factors that lead to cardiovascular health and or non-health, right? There are some benefits with Resolvins, but the benefits are absolutely clear when it comes to neurological. There's some pulmonary, amazing work being done for pulmonary issues. Today, I just want to throw that in there so you keep in mind that the damage happening neurologically can be reversed and stopped under inflammatory conditions using Resolvins, right? And that's been demonstrated over and over again. Okay, another big one for you guys. Good reading for later, right? Good reading for later. Tomorrow, at the end of the day, there'll be a quiz on this talk. Okay? Well, let's talk about the cell types. Again, this is a great reference. I'm doing this for you guys because during our research, I really wanted for you to have a way to look back on what our immune system's doing as you relate it to this really complicated Resolvin piece. Because the Resolvins are going to be amazing clinically, and they're going to be really easy for you to eventually understand, and you've got people coming up behind me like Pomp and others that will give you more clinical. But you can relate it back to your immune health, overall immune health, which is still going to be critical. This is, again, one tool. But you can see your neutrophils, dendrites, macrophages, they all have a job, right? And we get down into, so this is our first responders. These are our second responders. And the communication, this is literally no different, and I've used this analogy before. The communication with your body under stressful times is not that different under chronic, horrible insult, inflammation, is no different than New York City on 9/11. There are thousands of cells trying to do different jobs, having to talk to each other, having to talk to the people, having to talk to the tissue, having to chase down the bacteria or the other things, the terrorists or whatever you want to call them, having to do all these things. It is New York City at that site. Their communication is critical. When they're not communicating, you're making a mistake, and if you make that mistake, you can enter into chronic inflammation. Now we have a problem, right? So it's amazing to think about what goes on here. That's the really amazing part of what your body does that I'm not going to be able to spend. We could spend a semester on that because it's brilliant. But we're not going to do that. Antibodies. Everybody thought about antibodies? You guys ever think about antibodies? You know, we do the ALCAT test. We do other antibody tests. I know that we even do some, you know, we even work with people in systemic and get antibody tests. Have you ever stopped and think, what do different antibodies do? Why do I get IgG versus IgA or IgM? You know, why does anybody do that or even think about that? I wanted to give you guys a brief introduction as to why we do and what exists out there. These are the different isoforms, the types. These are the names, of course, that you'd be familiar with. And in some cases, when you look at some of the tests you do order, you might find discrepancies. You might be ordering an IgG for something that you want to add an IgA to, if it's an allergic response. You might be getting the wrong test sometimes. And that isn't your fault. Sometimes the people offering you the test haven't thought it through, or they're not looking at the current things. For example, I know that happens in the case of, I think it's IG. Let's see, so we have IgA, and where to go? Oh, isn't it? It's cut off? You don't have IgM? No, that's weird. I can get you my slides afterwards, too, for anybody. But I wanted to point out, where did it go? I can't read it fast enough. Allergies, right? Some people that deal with allergies, they order the IgA or IgG, but IgE is still critical in that piece. You can't ignore IgE. They're all part of the adaptive immune response. You're not going to need to know much more about them for my talk. I'm trying to introduce you to things that encompass this entire process. So chronic inflammation. Is it critical we deal with chronic inflammation? If anybody answers no, of course, go out there. Okay? We know it's huge. We know it's enormous. We know it's a chronic issue. We know it's going to plague us for the next 20 years, and the only people that can make a difference are you guys. The other models that we have in play aren't addressing this. They're addressing the symptoms. They're addressing anti-inflammation. They're spending billions to do that. You guys have a chance to change it in your city, in your town, in your state, but we better start doing it now, or our children are going to. We're worried about, you know, the deficit to Afghanistan. The deficit to our medical model is going to be overwhelming with these kinds of things that are happening, these diseases. Chronic inflammatory response. Now, I get to talk about these, by the way, because you're currently listening to me in CEU-based teaching. At the end of this, we're going to switch to non-CEU, but right now, so I get to speak about things that have nothing to do with products, okay? Chronic inflammatory response, neuroinflammatory, these all, and this is the short list. This is just a quick short list. This could go on and on and on, as you know. Well, here's some of the dollar figures, and I think this was pulled, I pulled this from just like 2 months ago, and there's some predictions here, but check it out. 2020, look at what's going on with chronic illnesses. Our energy has been spent over the last 50 to 100 years on infectious diseases or communicable or, you know, these agents, kill, right? How long, I mean, when you guys were growing up, it's kill. Nobody cared 20 years ago about something called chronic inflammation. We're just getting into that. We all know it's important, but so right now it's starting to hit its stride, and it's going to create millions of deaths worldwide. And it's not just our country, it's worldwide by 2020. It's increasing, as you guys mentioned earlier, or agreed to anyway. So this is a critical story. Why resolution? Because resolution was a discovery made by Sirhan. We knew about it even before him, a little bit about it through another pathway that I won't spend a lot of time on. We'll briefly touch on it. It's an arachidonic acid pathway. But the idea that resolution is an active process. It's not a passive process. It's an active decision to get your body back to homeostasis. It's a catabasis. It wants to actively move you from a state of stress back to a state of happiness at the cellular level. Does that make sense? Who here doesn't believe in that philosophy? How many of us want to go from a state of stress to a state of balance and happiness? If you do not, there's the door. I'm kidding. That's mean. I should take your neuroscience. The idea is your body already has an active process to do that. It's been neglected. It's been abused. It's been hindered by the toxins that you're exposed to. And how we discovered it is there's something called an exudate. A better way to put this is pus. Anybody not familiar with that term? In an injury, that pus is the little New York City of fighters I told you about. Everything's there, trying to do battle. When you sample that pus early on, you're going to find all the cytokines, prostaglandins, leukotrienes. You're going to find the inflammatory things, the macrophages, the neutrophils. They're all doing the kill, do this thing for your body. You know, let's help it. When you examine and keep examining that pus for a while, there's a switch that happens. Once the inflammation piece starts getting a hold of what's going on in your body, there's a switch. It's an active switch. It's not a passive thing that your body does, oh, well, let's try to get better. No, there's a switch, an active switch that says, let's turn off the macrophages, let's turn off the killing, let's shut down the cytokines, let's stop telling the arteries and the endothelial cells to be permeable, let's shut down the permeability, let's start actively resolving inflammation. And it uses some really amazing fat molecules to do that. And if those fat molecules aren't there, if they're not being produced, if the enzymes are damaged and all these other things, you don't get that process, and that process keeps going. But it's an active decision your body's making, not a passive one. That's the key point here. And you can study it through what we call exudates. So I'll use the word exudate or pus. And that's how it was discovered, and that's how it continues to be studied. All right. There's 4 kinds. Again, this is just for your medical dictionary, your medical words, however you guys, if you guys want to use big words and you're giving a talk and you've already handed out the Neurosin, you can talk about the different phases that it goes through. And it ends up in a suppurative, right? And at that point, we want infection, now we're getting into severe, right? You can see each one of these has an issue. When you can start getting up into here and here, you're not resolving when you should be. It might need some intervention, some natural intervention. A Roman gladiator surgeon made this quote. I'm not going to read the Latin. Advocate the formation of pus in order to promote healing of wounds. Isn't that an amazing quotation from someone between 130 and 200 AD? Isn't that an amazing identification from someone that was probably on the battlefield, probably had seen 100 people, and knew the difference between the guys and the ladies that were getting better and the ones that weren't? When they weren't resolving through this process of this pus and this natural formation of resolution. And you guys have seen it on your own body, whether it be the redness and the pus, and then it starts to dry and change, and cells start to tighten, and you start to make new cells and all. We've seen it happen. If that process doesn't happen, that's active resolution. He noticed if you don't allow that to happen, and it's not taken care of, you start to enter into chronic, and then you're getting into danger. And in that period of time, you died, most assuredly. Okay, this is the 1979 version of inflammation. I'm not going to go through it with you. You can read it later. But again, it had some information. But we thought of, from AD until recently, we thought of inflammation as a passive process that didn't need to be worried about. If it didn't happen, oops, oh well. But we're more worried about anti-inflammatories than we are inflammatories. So why don't we try to shut down this process a little bit more? Right? Good idea? Is that a good idea? No, not a good idea. So even in 79, they had some things right, but they had a lot of things wrong. But it's not lost on everybody. Look at this. In the treatment of in the treatment of disease, there was another observation, right? If not unduly interfered with the process of the wound to terminate the state of health. So again, there was this notice that if you try to terminate anything, try to terminate the fever too soon, or try to stop the process, that it actually made the patients worse. Or there are these people that, this was a Roman medical writer, I don't have a year on this one, but again, there was this identification that the body needs to go through certain things to get better. Don't speed it up, don't interfere. Of course, now we have all these other challenges. Namely, the challenges of modern industrial chemicals is one of our issues. So, what are these things I'm talking to you about today for the rest of the day? We have what we call lipoxins, which I won't spend as much time on. they do not come from omega-3s found in animals. They're not krill-based, they're not fish-based, they're arachidonic acid-based. And they're released from their phospholipids by an enzyme called PLA2. And there's a really complex phenomenon that makes your body makes a decision to whether to make lipoxins or leukotrienes or prostaglandins. They're all made from the same compound. So your body has to choose. Do I turn arachidonic acid into an inflammatory one or a resolving one? That's their body's choice. So your body needs to be healthy and have the tools to make those choices. These ones down here, more newly discovered, and there are more that I'll talk about today from our research, that get turned into resolvins, protectins, and maresins. And you'll notice that DHA and EPA, you've heard those terms, those are algae derived, they're de novo from algae, and then marine organisms then take them up, concentrate them, and change them a little bit in krill, fish, and shrimp and other things, right? So they become a marine compound that we then eat. We can make them, but it's very difficult. Very taxing. So the arachidonic acid cycle, I know these words might be new to some of you, but again, the reason we're here is this is your introduction to this, because you will be coming to more of my talks, and if you're not, you're going to be in trouble. I've got every one of your names on a list. All right. So you can see this is the decision pathway I told you about. Arachidonic acid can choose to come down here and make prostaglandins and cyclins and so on, or it can choose to come down here and make your lipoxins, which are way down here, right? And it's a very specific process to do this. So your body has to be in pretty good condition. You've got to be giving it the right nutrients to do this. It cannot be neglected. Well, what is the classical definition? We've talked about that. And then I want to start introducing you to the concept of what it looks like in your body, in tissue, so that we can go from hardcore science into thinking about you as a healer, back to hardcore science, and then back to healer. We're going to jump back and forth a little bit. This is what your tissue looks like. And we want to go from, we insult a tissue, right? We insult a piece of skin. And then we watch it go through the peak of inflammation, then we watch it resolve. We're going to talk about this later, but what do you think happens if I take resolvins made from DHA and EPA and I add them to this tissue right here? What do you think happens? Do you think I change going from here to here, or do I make it worse? Do I make it better? It makes it a lot better. Makes it a lot better. A lot better. One of the things that you might see in the future that have nothing to do with us, but I noticed that during our research and the research of other people that are looking at these things now, because they are brand new discovery, the medical model is interested because now they're purifying these guys right here, and they're using them post-surgery, and they're getting 75% speeding up of wound healing by giving them to people after they've taken out a gallbladder, whatever cutting they're doing. So they are using them to resolve and rebuild. It's not just resolving. It makes all those choices your body make, the resolving of inflammation, the reducing of the permeability of your tissues, the recruitment of new nutrients to the area to build tissue, and so on and so forth. So we're not the only ones looking at these things is really my point. Well, that idea of resolution isn't new, but now we have the tools and the understanding to really get at it. It does go back, it dates way back. This is the 11th century, right? Where the term resolvent came about in this book, the disappearance of inflammation. So this is really fun to see something that was ancient and noticed, but now we know how it actually works, right? They would have no idea back then, but now we know how it works. Okay, graphics. You guys are going to have to start getting used to these, a little more of them. So here we have acute inflammation. And this is each one of these you're going to see, this is the rise and fall of, your immune system cells recruited to the site of inflammation. So you get edema, then you get these polymorphonuclear neutrophils or leukocytes that invade your wound. You get these macrophages, and they all come up and go down. That's a good-looking chart. And you'll never have to look at these charts again, but I have to look at them because I have to know when we're using this krill, are we doing this? Are we allowing your body with these ingredients to go through inflammation healthily and then resolve healthily? And do they help or hinder or otherwise? This would be a graph that you would get if that person did not enter into resolution. This is a graph that represents chronic inflammation. There's ups and downs. There's a roller coaster event. You know, they a little better and a little worse, a little better. You know, today it's good, tomorrow it's bad, so on, right? Today I'm really feeling myalgic and everything. Tomorrow I feel a little bit better. You know, that's this right here, okay? And it gets worse. And when you introduce things like this, you actually get a marked improvement. So those are the graphs you see. How do they exert their effects? Nice reference slide for you. They do the opposite of what started everything. So when you hear the word Resolvins, Maresins, Protectins, they actually reverse everything you started. When you start inflammation, you recruit, you open, you heat, you dollar, and all those things. Resolution just goes through the same process of reversal. Turns these guys off, shuts these guys down, sends the EMTs home, sends the firemen home, you know, calls in the architects to start rebuilding the buildings and so on. That's what resolution is. And it uses all the same guys. It uses your entire arsenal of immune system to do what it did to start the inflammatory process. So if you don't have resolution, all your firefighters and stuff are still running around, spraying water on everything, and they got their guns pulled, and they're shooting people randomly because they don't know the difference between who's good and bad, right? This is the reversal. This is the active process of getting better. And this is what it looks like graphically. You want to inflame, you want to reach a point, and then you want to resolve. That is what you want from every person you see. So is something like taking high-dose krill with Resolvins a good idea for a lifetime? High doses for a lifetime? Look at this graph, you guys. We want to resolve inflammation. We want the body to do its job after you've helped them get over this hump. Now, the more chronic they are, it might take longer. If they've been in chronic inflamed for a decade, it's not going to be overnight, right? They're not going to tell you, oh, yeah, I feel better. No. They've got chronic inflammation. It takes time. But you still want your patients to go through this graph. You want them to be back to a normal, basal, healthy, balanced level. That is the goal. That is the goal of your body. That is the goal of us. That is the goal of Resolvins, Protectins, and Maresins, right? This is what your graphs should look like in your head. There's another one just to see normal response initiation and the resolution. These graphs just give you a visual of what you expect from patients depending on where they're at. You should be horrible to a point where it maxes out and then start to go better. Okay? So think of that in terms of graphical resolution. And I want to point out again one more time, this is a nice way to keep hitting you guys with this so that it'll stick at some level. It involves the same cells that got you into a bad place in the first place. It involves your immune system. So if you're trying to resolve somebody and they have an immune issue, do you think we ought to think more openly about what's going on in their body? Or do we just keep throwing Resolvins and Maresins Protectins at them? I mean, you know more about your patients than just that, correct? What if you know that they also have other immunological issues that need to be supported in different ways? These are the same guys. You're still dealing with the immune system. If the immune system's unhappy and you give it Resolvins, you might start to resolve it. But if you have other issues, this is where your tool, your training, your educating, your coming to these things gives you that edge. What if they're full of toxins? Full of toxins. You've run the tests, you've done whatever testing you do. These Resolvins, Protectins, Maresins can give you a nudge of a benefit, but is that going to solve it? Do these things get rid of toxins? No. So I want you to start, as I'm talking, as I'm presenting this to you, start putting this in context of what causes inflammation, what you know about your patients, and where do Resolvins fit in. No matter what, that's the timeline or the intellectual process that you have to go through. Today I'm going to give you the tool about what Resolvins do and how they can be phenomenally helpful. Perhaps one of the more helpful things that you'll have this year in your toolbox. However, you've got to go through this whole thinking process as clinicians, okay? I don't want that to be lost in all my science. Okay, we want to go through it. So let's do it. Let's start talking about it. You know, like I told you, pus is essential to it. We want to start hitting the various points of let's get into resolving. This is, again, a resolution phenomenon. I want to throw this up there because as we move forward, I'm going to be presenting you with really fun things about the microbiome, about microRNAs. The next meeting you come to, and you will be here, the next few, okay? And we're going to go over the different things that we can start doing now that we've discovered these things in krill, okay? And we can test them. And that's another thing. As you guys, I'm going to say this at the end of my talk, but as you guys start using Resolvins, Protectins, and Maresins, I want you to give us feedback because it'll be critical in the evolution of these kinds of compounds. They're brand new. Brand new, so you will be on the cutting edge of trying to understand how they behave in different patients. Patients with different genetic backgrounds, patients with different environmental backgrounds, patients with different emotional backgrounds, okay? It'll be your job to keep up on this moving forward, which is what this is all about. We don't want to do anti-inflammatory, we want to do resolution. Because now we stop, with an anti-inflammatory action, you stop the lipoxins and resolvins. And so far what I've told you is that is a good idea or bad idea? Bad idea. Who didn't say that? Let's hear it again. A good idea or bad idea? Okay, I didn't see your mouth move. It's a bad idea, you guys. It's anti-inflammatories halt the process, and then you have to sit and wonder what's going on with your patient for the next 6 months, year, 2 years. We don't want to be in that game at all. All right, so we have all this possibility to move it through the process, allow the immune system to recover. What are these things? You're going to start seeing these now. These are your beginning starting points, EPA, DPA, and DHA. We're going to try to use the shortest terms available. On your slides are the long, drawn-out terms. But I need to introduce these to you guys because our research focused on a lot of this technical biochemistry, which is still fun, I promise you. These are the resolution graphicals, as you know, and these are the things that your body can make them out of. Who knew, here, who in this room knew that EPA and DHA made more than one or two things? When you thought about EPA, DHA, did you guys think about it being more than just EPA or DHA? Most people don't. Where do you think most EPA and DHA, and it is a lipid, remember it's a lipid, ended up in the body? You've been to other meetings. Yeah, thank you. Who said that? Lipid bilayers. We think of them as membrane-bound things because they're fats, and the most abundant fats in our body in the membranes. This means that they have many, many more jobs. This is the beginning of fat research. You guys understand that? Fat research. How many of you guys care about fat? Well, we care about fat in a number of ways, and we've made a lot of bad decisions regarding fat over the last 50 years, have we not? Don't eat butter. Eat this synthetic stuff, tastes like butter, right? We've had a lot of challenges with fat. Fat research is taking us to the next level. Fat isn't just fat, you guys. Fat is so many more things. Communicates with cells, turns cells on and off, turns genes on and off. It's now a molecule. Different fats have different roles, and I'm telling you, this is the beginning of the fat revolution. I'm not saying get fat, okay? But this is the beginning of a fat revolution. We're learning that fat can change our lives in ways that you couldn't imagine. Without it, you're a wreck, okay? This is the beginning of it. Here's more. Wow, look at these things. Aren't these things lovely looking? Okay? They are lovely, and you're going to hear how I study these, and you're going to be really tired by then. Okay? So stretch, do whatever you need, tap your feet against the ground, what have you, because we're not done with these guys. But here's the deal. EPA and DHA turn into all these guys. These RVs stand for resolvins, okay? Resolvins, protectins, Maresins, right? These are protectins. If you look at these guys long enough, they just look like a blur, but what I can tell you is each one does a different job. Each one of these guys has a partner in your body that it talks to. Do any of you think hormones are unimportant? What happens if I just removed testosterone from all the men on the planet? Not a good idea, is it? These are that important. They are hormones that talk to your immune system. When you remove these from your immune system isn't getting communicated to, and it's making bad choices. Horrible choices, in fact. So these, we care about them. And they start here, and there's some more. There's one other starting point, which is called DPA, which is kind of new. You may have heard of it. Here's more. Woohoo! DPA. That's another one. Again, you guys can refer back to these. You may never do it again in your lifetime. This may be calculus. You used it once, you never use it again. I get it. But if you ever do, you can think of me, that I gave you this slide. Otherwise, you can curse me. But look how many that makes. Look how important 3 natural occurring fats found in algae, then in animals, are to you and your body's communication, your immune system's communication. These 3 guys are responsible for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, dozens of hormones. It would be like telling you to stop making cholesterol, which is your precursor to most of your other steroid hormones, right? Or to stop eating protein because we don't need protein hormones anymore. These are critical. Well, let's do a quick summarization of some things we've done. So we know some of the biological actions. That's been done. A lot of that work was by Sir Han. Now we're going to move into that world. We're also going to look at how they work, because now we have tools to look at these things, right? Of course, one thing that modern technology has given us is tools, lots of tools. And what we can do in our lab now is we've used some really cool tools to find them in krill. And I keep saying krill because krill is our baby. Fish is Sir Han's baby, right? That's where he has done all of his research. Oh, more of those structures. How cool is this? There's some enzymes here I want to point out. Enzymes, guys. Does anybody remember the enzyme called COX or LOX? Anybody heard of the enzyme called COX? COX 1 and 2? What does it do? Why do we care about COX? It's the target of most NSAIDs. When you eat an NSAID, right, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, you are inhibiting COX and LOX. More COX than LOX. They are the first step in making resolvins. The one exception to this is salicylin from willow and low-dose aspirin. Salicylin from white willow, salicylic acid, and aspirin. Low-dose aspirin actually turns these guys into better enzymes, believe it or not. It's the only time you're going to hear me say that about, some drug thing. But it's not completely known, but low dose is, like baby aspirin for adults. Mm-hmm. Okay, these are the receptors. This one would definitely put you asleep. I'm not going to tempt you with that. I'm not going to tempt you with sleep. It's in there. This is my point with this slide is that you guys, this is no longer theory. This is reality. We know, just like if you take THC into your body, we know where it binds. We now know where these resolvins bind in your brain, on the neurons, on all the white blood cells. They're no longer just an idea. We know where they're binding. That's what this is. And turning genes on and off. So you can see, with the LOX, there's certain types of LOX. So 15 LOX helps make resolvins. We don't want to hurt that guy. We don't want to take anti-inflammatories. These are charts for everything. If we anti-inflammatory this guy, then you don't start making this guy right here. You go and you make, this by the way is an inflammatory marker. That turns on inflammation. We make a lot of that. But if we kill this guy, we don't make any of this, and so we sit here with all these floating around. You're in inflammation. Guess what else it does? This was an accidental discovery. It wasn't my discovery. However, it is a discovery nonetheless, and it's quite important. By giving these compounds to lots and lots of patients, they started finding that they were reporting through various questionnaires and interactions with their healthcare providers, clinicians, and so on, pain reduction. So they tested it. Resolvins made from these compounds reduce pain. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Hopefully you'll get some more later. But this is clear. With the dose, pain reduction, and it worked as well as morphine and the COX inhibitors, which are the bad guys. And there's no consequences. It is a normal, natural, wonderful thing your body produces, and yet it helps with pain. These are other real-time human-type studies that we're going over. I don't expect we're not going to get deep into them. That's for later meetings. But again, we want to do self-resolving. So what we do is we take people that self-resolve, and then you can cause resolution to be delayed. We certainly have drugs to do that, don't we? We have lots of things to delay resolution. But then when you add resolution back into it, when you add Resolvins, Maresins, or Protectins back into that, you get recovery. You get back down again. That's the test, right? That's the quick test. Do they actually do what we say they're doing? I don't know. Let's create a chronic inflammatory situation and just use those. Does that go away? Do the white blood cells respond? Do the neutrophils respond? And the answer is yes, 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 yes. Does the tight junction close again? Yes. What's the one thing we did differently? We added these to the system. So I'm just trying to get you guys excited. This is another one based on an E. coli infection. We used an E. coli, created an infection scenario, and then resolved it using Resolvins. Okay? And the run Resolvin used was RD5. What else can we do? Well, I wanted to point this out. This one actually made me think of Pampa, I'll be honest. This is the Maresin. You'll get in a second why I thought of Pampa with this one. Maresins are unique. They're found everywhere in nature. You can see here they're found in exudates, which is the pus. They're found in planaria, which are different animals. They're found in human milk. They're found in human macrophages. We didn't know what they did at first. We know more about them now. But guess why this made me think of it? This is a fat. But guess what was attached to this particular fat to create a Maresin, something that heals you faster? Glutathione. Glutathione is linked, there's glutathione, to this DHA to create a new thing your body's created. Isn't your body cool? Your body is so cool. It takes glutathione, joins it with a Resolvin, and now you got this brand new thing that heals even better. That's the body doing that. So what do you need enough of? Glutathione and DHA EPA stuff, right? To do this. So I thought of him on that. Because isn't that cool? That's so cool. And there's many more examples of these really cool things coming out all the time. All right, here's our injury deal. Remember, we have normal tissue, we injure it, and then we resolve it. And this one happens to be the resolution using that glutathione fat, Maresin. How cool is that? And it particularly helps one of your white blood cells, your eosinophils. Eosinophils are extremely dangerous if they're not turned off. They start penetrating muscle, just so you know. So when people start having pain and issues, and it's an inflammatory autoimmune type, it's because some of these cells, these white blood cells, they penetrate into your muscle cells. They shouldn't be, but they are, and that's what creates it. We can turn it off. This is really fun. I don't know if you can see it on your slide. Hopefully you can, but these are all the Resolvins found in human milk. How cool is that? I love human milk for its microbiome properties. All the polysaccharides that are just there to set up the microbiome in a baby. But it turns out these guys exist in human milk. How awesome is that? Your baby is getting this introduction to all these anti-inflammatory, all these resolving molecules that mom made, right? First thing as it enters the planet. How awesome is that? I figure if it's in human milk, it's got to be important, doesn't it? Doesn't it? I mean, that just stands to reason. Anything that goes into a baby's mouth has to be important, right? Who cares about 40-year-olds? You know, we've run our course. You know, we're old hat. Babies are where it's at, right? They're the future. They are the future. This has been happening, and if your mama isn't taking care of her things and has been exposed and all these things we talk about when we talk about chronic inflammation, she's not providing these. If she's on chronic anti-inflammatories, do you think she's making these things? Not enough, guys. And so now what has she done to the baby? She's created an inflammatory issue with babies. And we know those exist, do we not? Do we not know that inflammatory chronic issues are going younger and younger and younger. Here's one of the reasons. Mama's not doing this, baby's not ready for the world, right? Okay, this experiment can be done. This will be the next round of experiments we do at Systemic Formulas using these krill things. I just want to show you this. We now have our really cool krill. We can then give it to people of all walks of life, all conditions, healthy, whatever we want. And now we can actually measure resolvins appearing in the bloodstream in white blood cells, by the way. Of course, we look at the white blood cells. So this will be something you will see coming from us, this kind of work. Looking at how when you give them, the resolvins improve, right? They're back up to normal, healthy levels. How fun is that? For me, it's great fun. And if you want, you can come join me. So let's summarize this, guys, a little bit. We have anti-inflammation is not equivalent to pro-resolution. We all agree on that, correct? We agree anti-inflammation is not the same as pro-resolution. That is the body's decision. We need to stop inhibiting the body. Where do we come into play? Why do we need to intervene, though? I've said it a number of times. If I'm on here, you tell me. Come on. Why would we need to intervene in what would otherwise be a normal phenomenon? Louder? To accelerate it. Why would it be stunted, maybe? Why would the process be stunted in your world? Toxins, thank you. Toxin environment. Stressors. Do we have a pretty much stress-free society? Right? No, we don't. Do we have a toxin-free society? No. Do we have the most amazing diet in our society? Okay? I mean, we can keep making jokes, but this is no laughing matter, right? I mean, I am trying to make you laugh because I don't want you to get tired, but the reason we care about this, the reason we have to intervene, and it's not really intervention, it's really taking back what our bodies always needed. We've always loved algae and fish. I mean, I love eating algae products and fish products and, krill. I mean, it's amazing. We've always done it. We've always loved it. We've always needed it. They're a great source of everything. And when they're clean, they're the best. But when we eat things that aren't high in nutrients, high in value, high in these kinds of compounds, it's like eating a tomato from, gosh, I can't even say because it would be not nice, but if you just went to get a tomato that was picked green, put into a truck, shipped to a freezer, sprayed with ethylene, and then given to you, are you getting your beta-carotene? Are you getting lycopene? Are you getting those things you need? No. We don't have those things. We have to intervene as people. You people have to intervene. I have to tell you to intervene, right? And if you didn't hear that, take your Neurosyn again. Okay. Well, we do care. We all care. It's important. It's important that we care. It's important that we do these things. It's important that we do these things for a number of reasons. One of the groups that we're working with on the Krill project is to sustain things like krill, sustain things like herbs and other oils that we get from our planet. We don't want to take it all and then it's gone, do we? That makes no sense, right? So it's important that we do this because it gives it value. It gives all these things value if we care about it. RPM. So we talked about RPMs a lot. Resolvins, Maresins, Protectins. I want every one of you guys to say that. Faster. Okay. We care about resolvins, Maresins, and Protectins because your body makes them, but your body needs tools to make them. We can help it out by taking from other animals what they've made to facilitate this process. How many of you here are familiar with 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate? By raise of hands. No? It's the special folate. Anybody just heard of the special folate? It's not folic acid, right? It's the other one. We care about that because why? It's further down the pathway. Do you guys remember that? It helps you at the point of need. Otherwise, if you just eat folic acid, you might not get there. You with me? Right? This is the same type of story. when we eat these things from animals like krill, we're giving you further down the pathway fats that aren't just EPA, not just DHA, not just linoleic acid. They're further down. They're not as abundant, but they're further to help get people on the right track. Once you come to the bottom of that curve, you can put them back on healthy diet, healthy everything else, right? Get them past this chronic inflammation that will kill them if you do not. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at this process of how can we give you more of what nature provides further down the pathway. There are some other issues that we face, like with the 5-methyltetrahydrofolate. Some of us have what we call genetic predispositions. Have you heard of that? Single nucleotide polymorphisms. This may, now this is a big may. I don't have the data yet, but I suspect that many of us might have challenges in all these enzymes that you saw with all my crazy little diagrams and the paths and all the arrows. Every one of those arrows represents an enzyme. An enzyme, if it has a SNP or a single, it may not work as well. So we also want to provide things that are beyond that issue to get people better, like the 5-methyltetrahydrofolate, right? What's the gene that we want to help out? 5-methyltetrahydrofolate reductase, okay? Can you test for that SNP? How many in this room have tested for that SNP? Hands higher. Yeah, right? Science is out there on that one. There's things that it isn't out there. I'm predicting there'll be some things in this pathway that we can help. There'll be some things we can't. We just need to keep doing the right thing, giving them the right choices. It's not going to be the universal, but there's some information there. All right. That's why we care. That's why we want to give ourselves some options. So during that resolution of inflammation, of course, we want to establish back to homeostasis. The term that you'll see sometimes, I don't know if it's in my notes, is catabostasis. That means actively getting back to homeostasis. And we want to inhibit the production of inflammatory mediators, right, that may lead to dysregulation of RPM. It's no different, again, if I want to liken it to a scenario or a story. What do antibiotics do to your gut? Do they kill the bad guys? Yeah. What also do they do? Perhaps in more insidious, they kill the good guys. And often we find that killing the good guys has short-term or long-term consequences. Yeah, both really, right? That is not a smart idea. And now what do we have? We have, after decades of use of antibiotics, we have what we call antibiotic resistance. Yeah, we keep learning, right? Don't you wish you could walk up to certain people and smack them upside the head like you would, a little bully or something because of those decisions that we're now living with, back in the day? Yes, you probably do, even if you're not violent. But we don't want to go down that path. So we want to start regulating using these resolvins as opposed to dysregulating using anti-inflammatories, which, by the way, can be natural. There are natural anti-inflammatories. You could potentially provide your patients with an absolutely natural anti-inflammatory, but I still caution you that that is doing potentially some harm, not good. So you have to keep that in mind. There's probably a time and a place, right? But we have to consider that. This particular scenario takes us down the resolution, and that's where your body's happy, in resolution, right? And like Nicole said, let's say you're fighting with somebody. How many of you like to fight with your significant other and leave it unresolved? Anybody? Oh yeah, I'm in a constant, do you want to walk around going, yeah, I'm in an unresolved fight with my significant other. Who? Your body's telling you the same thing. Please let me get into resolution. Because it can't divorce you or leave you or whatever. It has to live with you. You are all it's got. All right. We're getting close, you guys. We're getting close. I know it's a lot. Another small, easy to read slide. Right? Okay, just for you guys. I wanted to point out, here's all the fun things we know about Resolvins. If this isn't legible in your things, again, I will send all my slides to customer service, and you guys can have an enlargeable copy. But this really points out how the Resolvins, these are the Resolvins on the left, it's what they interact with, what cells, and what they do. Because we're starting to know a lot more about how they interact, what they do. Right? It's kind of just a job description for Resolvins is all it is. All right. So our approach. Traditional tests aren't enough. So those of you that like to practice with blood, urine, and other tests, here's a list, a short list, but a decent list of how to get at resolution as opposed to inflammation. Okay? Some of these things you'll see are very, very inflammation-driven. You can still do those. That's not a bad thing. It gives you an idea. But resolution happens to come in these guys right down here. So ESR, CRP, you know those guys. We've got Th1 or Th17, TB beta 1. These are the Treg cells test, and I'm going to list them more down here. We got C3A, C4A, MMP9, and TGF beta 1. These start to give you an idea of whether or not resolution is taking place. They start to show up as your body produces more resolvins, maresins, and protectins. There's tests that do. Not necessarily these two, but TGF beta 1, and we'll get even more into the list here. So in your office, now this is take-home office stuff. Everything up to this point has been university-style learning, right? Now it's take-home. These are the tests that you should really consider looking at. Let's pick on this one, TGF beta 1. That increases when resolvins, maresins, and protectins are starting to do their job. That is an indicator of improved resolution, as opposed to like CRP, which is an indicator of increased inflammation. You with me? And you can go through this list and Google it and learn all these about it you want. I won't spend any more time today, really. Well, I will a little bit, but not a ton. You can look at ACLA, the D-dimer. These are all things you can start looking at and saying, wow, you know, if you're seeing these, the nutritional ranges or the ranges that we have set, and then the indication that you're going into resolution or the inflammation is decreasing. And you should also see a decrease in the inflammatory markers. So this is useful if you do these kinds of tests. If not, use your other techniques. Use what you've learned through applied kinesiology, through different instrumentations. Use whatever it is you use, but start asking the question about inflammation. Is it resolving? Is it not resolving? So whatever technique you use, the question that I want you to ask yourself and the patient together is, where are we at in inflammation? Am I resolving or am I not resolving? And if you start getting at that question, you're going to start making this transition into health, right? Put it out there that you're resolving. You're not inflaming, right? You're not anti-inflaming, you're resolving. There's some other things you can do, and many of you do this anyway, but in going through the resolving inflammation process, because we know that chronic inflammation is so life-disrupting, that it really is life-disrupting, it's sometimes useful to go through these kinds of questionnaires because you're dealing with a lot more than you think you are with some of these people. They could have been in this condition for a very long time. And you don't even know the extent of it until you ask further questions. Not just these questions, which are very subjective, right? Boom, blood, urine, what have you. These are very much more get to know your patient, what's going on in their lives, how do they feel, what kind of pains and aches, and what does their daily life feel like? Are they miserable 3 days a week, 4 days a week, and so on. These will get you to that. And these are all indicative of unresolved issues, unresolved inflammation. And once you get there, you've won part of the battle now, right? They're working towards this now. Okay, so what are the clinical ramifications? I think we've covered many of these, but what's a word that you can fill in here? Yeah. How about this one? Louder? Cardiovascular? Yeah, clearly. Relates. How about this one? Neurological? What about last one? What else? What else can we look at for this? What's one of my favorite topics? Microbiome, right? Dysbiosis. Dysbiosis is one of the early signs, right? When your microbiome is in a dysbiotic state, it's the first piece of communication and development of your immune system, right? You've all heard of GALT. I've said it a number of times. What does it stand for? Louder. Yep, got associated lymphoid tissue. So that means that about 70+% of your immune system is right here. That's where the decisions start to get made. You have an inflamed galt. Do you think you're going to have an inflamed brain? Do you think you're going to have leaky everything? You might as well leak out on the floor, right? I mean, really, when you're that inflamed, when you're chronic inflamed, you're leaking everywhere. You're leaking into your eyes. You're leaking into your brain. You're leaking into your lungs. You're leaking everywhere. I can't imagine a situation where leaking everywhere is a good thing. Can you? Right? It's why this situation, it's why resolving inflammation is so critical. You've heard Pampa preaching it for decades. You've heard Jack. You've heard us all preach it. Any of us that come up here, you know, Dawn, Dr. Marshall, all of you have all been up here saying, "Wow, chronic inflammation." There are many, many ways in your toolbox now to deal from the beginning of the gut to deep in the neurological tissue, right? All requiring different tools. I want this to be an additional tool for you to do, okay? So now, the cool part. Okay, the rest is cool. You gotta admit the rest is cool. I know it's heavy, and those of you who didn't take your Neurosyn, I don't apologize because I like doing this too, so sorry. It's fun for me. I am gonna get to the point where I start giving quizzes, though, at some point in time, just so you know. But here's where we come in. We have invested, we have rallied, we have had a great time. And I admit, part of it was serendipitous. When we first started learning about Resolvins, and I said, what an amazing piece, right? Whether it comes from the omega-6 world or the arachidonate or these DHA, EPA, DPA, what an amazing phenomenon the body is now doing. It is converting these three things into so much wonderfulness, right? I was all over it. I'm like, this is so exciting. Then once I started getting into it, I realized, well, some of the work that's being done, brilliantly, I might add, by Sirhan is all fish and algae. Now, he's driven by the intellectual process, and of course, he's Harvard trained, so he's in the medical model, just so you know. And he is developing some really cool drugs, I mean, you know, that might save people on the operating table. All for it. If you have to be on the operating table and you want to be saved, you know, they might be just the thing for you. When you're not on the operating table and you're dealing with chronic inflammatory issues like we do, we want to look at it differently. So I looked at it and I said, well, he didn't care about krill. That's so weird. And what I mean by care, he's intellectually locked down everything for fish and algae. He's got 33 patents on these things in algae and fish. I thought, man, I love krill, right? You guys know CVO. You should. Okay, if you don't know CVO, you didn't take your Neurosyn. Or we didn't do our job teaching you. But either way, CVO is krill-based. And I thought, I love krill. Why didn't he care about krill? Well, because once he discovered them, he's chasing the discovery into, you know, the physiology. So I called a few people, and I called Krill Company. I said, I think we have something here. I've already tested some krill. So I just called them up and said, send me a kilo of krill. Didn't tell them why. And found some really amazing things in krill. So then I'm doing, do I tell them? Do I not tell them? Well, of course I got to tell them. I don't have any way to get krill. So I called them up and said, we have some really cool research in krill. Would you be willing to, if we do the research, we own the intellectual property, and you're going to help make this krill? Oh, yeah, sure. All right. Like, have you heard of this stuff? And out of the 6 people at a giant krill place, only one was like, yeah, I think I've heard a little bit about that. I'm like, they haven't even been paying attention to what their krill is good for, right? Except for membrane, you know, it gets in the membrane, it helps the plasticity, it helps, you know, all those basic things, antioxidant in the membrane. You know, we know the old fundamentals of krill. Everybody knows those things, right? The things we've been touting up till now. It can help initiate positive, it doesn't create inflammatory prostaglandins, leukotrienes, and things like that, right? The DHA, DPA, and EPA don't create inflammatory. So we thought, well, if you eat enough fish oil, you're not creating inflammatory markers, you're slowing down the inflammation. Of course, not exactly right, but those are the old school thinking. The new school thinking is, yes, it does. It's critical in neurological tissue, in membranes, to some degree. Specialized membranes, not them all, but some. But more importantly now, we know it's Maresins, Resolvins, and Protectins. So we ventured into this project about 6 months ago, and we started finding amazing things in krill oil. And so we took krill, and when you make an oil, anybody here ever made an oil from a seed or a animal? You know, there's a process. It's natural, but you don't use any chemicals, but you fractionate it. You break it down because certain things are different in oils. So we did that. Okay, we did that, and I'm going to go through that. So we focused on these guys first, and then you'll notice here and here, these are the first step in the process, right? These are the first step in making resolvins, protectins, and maresins. They're step one. We cared about that. So I just told you that krill oil wasn't protected. Krill is a phospholipid. So fish and algae is a triglyceride. Again, you may want to keep that in your head, you may not. You may want to purge it. But it's different. Phospholipids mean that there's a polar head, and then you've got the DHA tails. So it finds itself in membranes. This is the water side, and this is the fat side, right? So it makes really good, it enters into membranes really easy. So it's more bioavailable. One of the krill stories is that when you eat krill versus the fish oil, more of it gets in the bloodstream pretty quickly because of the phospholipid piece. That's all well and good. That's old school thinking, which is great. We still wanted to get in there, but then we thought, what more is going on? So we developed a lot of intellectual work to find out what's going on inside krill, and can we find these Now I want to introduce you to this term, which you have to keep. Resolvins, protectins, and maresins are made by your body. What we give your body are called pro or pre-resolvins, protectins, and maresins, okay? You got to put the pro or pre in front of it, because that's not what you eat. Your body makes those from these things in the end, right? They're at the bottom of that chart. When you look here, they're down here. We're giving you this, 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 and in some cases, some other things in krill. Your body still has to make stuff. So we investigated a bunch of stuff. We started discovering, called them back and said, I got a lot of discoveries here. You've got to be taking me seriously now. This isn't a joke. You know, this is amazing stuff. It's so amazing that somebody else did it in fish and patented 33 times or whatever, you know, who cares? But I wanted them to take it serious because they would have to make this for me. If they didn't take it seriously, they'd be like, who cares? We just want to sell krill. No, that's not the point here. We have something we're doing here. So we kept going, and we developed a process for them that now we're working on with them. Here's what we found, you guys. This is just a sampling. Look at all the different things we found. 17, 5, 12, 8, 15, 9. The other world, they looked at 2, 17 and 18. We're finding all these new ones. We don't even know what they do in the body yet. But they're being made from DHA and EPA, which means they're there for a reason, right? You don't make things for no reason. You know, trees don't grow leaves for no reason. We don't have feet for no reason, right? So these will have potential, and we're finding all these things now. And so this is where we get to take it to the next step. What are they doing? Why are all these things found in nature, and when we eat them, what do they become? What kind of cool things are they doing for us? I think we're just beginning to understand that. So that's the fun here. Okay, the other story I want to tell you. There is, I told you, the Sirhan, the other company, has a product. I don't want to pick on them because I don't want to get in trouble. However, there's another product out on the market. It's fish oil based. So I wanted to compare the two, our process and the fish process. And this is the 17R-HDHA. Okay, so that is one of those things we care about. This is in the fish oil. Look at that little number right there. If you can't see it, it's an 84. That kind of indicates if I have 84 cookies here to create that peak, right? If I had 100 cookies, that peak would be a little bigger. If I had 200 cookies, that would be a little bigger, right? That's how this machine works. It measures how much. So there's your fish oil version. That is intellectually, by the way, I can't, you know, they patented it 100 times. But here's our krill, 748. 7 times more in krill. I was so excited when we saw this. I'm like, are you kidding me? How cool is this? That is so much fun because now this might explain why krill behaves differently than fish. And you don't have to take as much, right? Inherently, people have gotten results with less krill than they have with fish and algae. So it's starting to maybe help us understand what our bodies are doing with this stuff. So that was exciting. I know this is really complicated. Now, these are the other ones you see in there. And almost universally across the board, we got more than they did. Okay, here's another one. This one's out of the fish again, and you can see it's 134, I believe. And this is the other one. This is 18. This is from EPA. And then this one is 914, right? So again, it's more. And every time we did it, it was more. And we're going to keep doing this over and over until we are really confident. This isn't in your books. Do you guys want to know why? It's proprietary. Yeah, and it's a work in process. And I need to keep we got to publish papers, and we got to get this out there all at once, not bit by bit. Because it is an amazing piece of information. I should be jumping up and down right now. Maybe I'm tired. Maybe I need to take my Neurosin. But you guys, honestly, this is amazing. This is stuff you're looking at for the first time, to my knowledge, of anybody knowing what's in krill. The stuff in fish is all over. You can go find this stuff in fish because of Sirhan and his contemporaries, people that have come out of his laboratory. We can't find anything in krill. I had the people at that krill company look for this stuff. We're in the thick of this, and it's amazing. We learn something new every day. Yesterday, we discovered, and again, we weren't alone, unfortunately, but in krill we are. But in fish, there's something called an oxo-HDA or an oxo-EPA. Now, we think of, this is a digress. I'm digressing, but I think I have a little time, right? A little bit of time. Not a ton, but a little. My clock is gone. But anyway, every time we look at these things, krill, and we find something new, right? It's like looking into, the microscope and you see a new little parasite there. I mean, do you guys excited about parasites? I don't know, maybe not, as long as you don't touch the microscope, maybe. But it's neat. Every time we look at this, we find something new. It's phenomenal. We don't know necessarily what it means yet. This is all so new, we don't know what it means. From the fish group, we do know what a bunch of these mean. We do know how they influence our immune system and how they improve inflammation. But I think the story's going to keep going. I think we're going to keep learning more about. But back to the 7-oxo and the 5-oxo. That's an oxidized version. So when we think about some oxidized versions, they're not all bad. They're not all bad. There are some that you don't want. But now we know there are oxidized versions of EPA and DHA that get converted into Maresins and Protectins and lipoxins. But they live oxidized for a little while before they move on by the next enzyme. Well, in the past, we would have completely disregarded an oxidized one as being terrible, the enemy, evil. And that's just not the case. It's the same thinking we have when we think about the mitochondria. It cannot do its job without creating oxidation, can it? Which is why it's one of the most prevalent sources of free radicals. But it knows how to deal with them under good, healthy circumstances. With your patients, it's probably not the case. So you have to manage that with them. You have to do the antioxidants and the methylation and things. But that process is now not demonized so much. So there's these oxos that are actually quite important, which I thought was kind of amazing. And there's one more little fun thing we learned. And again, I thought of Pampa for this one too, because, Pampa is our omega-6 guy too. I mean, I'm sure he loves omega-3s. But I wanted to point this out. That's my other one. Let's go forward. Here's our omega-6. Remember the chart we talked about? So these are omega-3s, right? This is how they're made. This is just the physiological, again, chart you can refer to, going from alpha-linolenic to all the way down to DHA or EPA, right? And then, of course, we can go back and forth with enzymes. This is the omega-6, going all the way down to docosahexaenoic, okay? And then finally, omega-9s. Now, why do I care about this? Well, here's arachidonate, right? Arachidonate is an important piece, and it can go back and forth with EPA. But you don't usually think of omega-6 when you guys think of krill, do you? One of the other discoveries, and I don't know if someone else has found this yet or not, maybe they have. I haven't looked hard. But during this research, we found a ton of linoleic acid and gamma-linolenic acid in krill. Percentage amounts. So when you eat 100 milligrams, you're getting 20, 30, 40 milligrams each time, relatively speaking. It could be more. Of those omega-6s in krill. Nobody talks about that in krill. There's a little palmitic. I mean, there's these omega-6s that we didn't even know were there until we started doing this. So what I'm trying to get at you is, you hear all of us speaking about balances and homeostasis and all these things. We don't have to look far into nature to find, they are working at that. It's not strictly an omega-3. There's some balancing going on inside that oil that we didn't even know we were getting when we took it. So it's really fun. There is some things here that are new and novel. We don't know necessarily the nuances of it. However, we are so excited now to pursue this. And as far as I can tell, we're one of the few people on the planet pursuing it. So you guys are hearing this for the first time. Some of this data, as Dr. Cohn pointed out, came out yesterday. So it's pretty cool. Before we move on, we'll have time for questions, but I think, let's take a look real quick, you guys. What's next? Well, we want to keep working on the krill with that other company, right? We want to then set up an adaptive study. We've got to look at what's happening within the body, and we'll do that next. Then we want to follow some of these things that we've never seen before and find out why they're so important and what they do for us and what they've always done for us as we've eaten these marine organisms, and why, they've been helpful and we didn't even know it. And then here's what I mentioned earlier to you guys. You all, as you get into working with oils, you'll get back with us on oils, specifically krill, right? So I want to thanks. Now I can thank you for all of you for coming and listening and not falling asleep. In fact, I only have a couple of people to talk to after the meeting. Just kidding. Thanks for all you guys' support. You guys make this all possible. We do this for you guys. Nicole and Lana have been huge support on some of this stuff. They laugh at me because sometimes they look at me like you look at me. Like, what? Slow down. What are you talking about? Go away. Now you're bugging me. Just kidding. Charlie, he helped develop the assays. You guys have met him. If you don't, you could meet him on the tour if you do the tour. And then everybody else has been amazing. A lot of people have come together on this project. Everybody comes together on our projects. Nicole mentioned it's a family thing. It really is for everybody. We poke everybody with needles. We make everybody taste. We chase everybody else through the building to get some input, whether it smells good, tastes good, feels good. It is a very, very functional family. It's not dysfunctional. It's really fantastic. Thank them all. Now, I think this really wraps up the education CEU part.